The air in the hospital corridor was thick with panic, the sharp echo of footsteps pounding against sterile tiles as the cries of a young boy pierced the silence. "Please, someone help him." The waitress's voice cracked, trembling, her breath ragged as she clutched the limp body of a child against her chest. Her uniform was stained with sweat and tears, and yet she ran without hesitation, her arms locked tightly around the boy as though sheer willpower alone could keep his little heart beating. Beside her, a man in an expensive navy suit shouted at the staff, his face pale with dread. "Make way! Get a doctor now! He can't breathe!" His voice broke into desperation, the kind that strips away power, money, and pride in an instant. The boy's lips were turning blue, his small fingers twitching weakly as his head rolled back against the waitress's shoulder. Nurses rushed forward, but the waitress refused to let go. "Don't take him yet. Please don't take him from me. He's slipping, Oh, God, stay with me, baby!" Her words poured out in frantic gasps, and for those 20 seconds, the entire hallway froze in disbelief at the sight. A humble waitress, in her work apron, sprinting ahead of doctors and security guards, carrying the child of one of the most powerful men in the city. "Give him to me!" a nurse shouted, wheeling a stretcher forward. But the waitress shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "No, he trusts me. He knows me. Don't you, sweetheart? Just hang on. We're almost there." Her voice cracked into a whisper as she pressed her cheek against his hair. "Don't leave me now." The billionaire's composure shattered. His voice trembled, breaking into raw humanity. "Please, save him. Do whatever you have to. I'll pay anything. Anything." His hands trembled as he reached for his son, only to stop himself, helpless and broken. He could buy skyscrapers, airlines, entire industries, but in this moment, he could not buy a single breath for his boy. The emergency doors swung open with a loud crash as the team rushed them inside. The boy's frail chest barely rose. The machines beeped angrily, oxygen masks were lowered, and a doctor shouted orders that blurred together in the chaos. The waitress stood frozen, her heart pounding as she watched strangers surround the boy she had carried as if he were her own. Her apron was damp, her arms trembling from the weight of fear more than from the child himself. She whispered to herself, "Please, let him live. Please." The billionaire stepped closer to her, his voice hoarse. How did you even know? Why were you there?" His eyes searched hers, desperate for answers, desperate for anything to hold on to in the storm. Her lips trembled. I was just serving drinks." He took one sip and suddenly he started shaking. "I knew something wasn't right. I didn't think. I just ran." She clutched her apron, her knuckles white. "I couldn't let him die in front of me." The man stared at her, his breath unsteady. For years, people had bowed to him, spoken to him with rehearsed politeness, treated him as untouchable. But this woman, this waitress, had not seen a billionaire. She had only seen a child gasping for life, and that truth pierced deeper than any blade. The doctor's voice cut through the air like a knife. "We need to run a tox screen immediately. This looks like poisoning." The words slammed into the room, silencing every breath. The billionaire staggered back, his face collapsing. "Poisoning? What are you saying?" His voice cracked, breaking the barrier between power and vulnerability. "Who would poison my son?" The waitress gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. No, he's just a little boy. Who would do that to him?" Her knees weakened, but she held herself upright, her eyes locked on the boy through the glass panel of the ER room. Inside, the child's small body twitched as the machines hissed and beeped. Nurses injected fluids, oxygen was pumped, and still, the tension clung to the air like smoke. The billionaire pressed his palm against the glass, his breath fogging the surface. "Fight, my boy, please fight!" His words were barely audible, but the waitress heard them, and they cut through her chest. She turned to him, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. He will He's stronger than this. He just needs time. For the first time in years, the billionaire looked at someone and felt small. This woman, who earned less in a year than he spent on a single dinner, was the only one who had carried his son out of death's grip. He swallowed hard, his throat tight. Why would you risk yourself like that? Her answer was simple, quiet, but it shook him to his core. Because he's a child, and children deserve to live no matter whose son they are. The words lingered in the air, heavier than the silence that followed. The billionaire lowered his gaze, ashamed that it had taken a stranger to remind him of something so pure. The ER doors banged open again, and the doctor rushed out, peeling off his gloves, his face grim. The room's heartbeat froze. "We've stabilized him for now," he said, his voice heavy. "But you need to know, he was poisoned. Deliberately." The billionaire's jaw dropped. His eyes darted from the doctor to the waitress, then back again. His voice trembled. "Deliberately? Who could—" He couldn't finish. The waitress whispered, her voice almost breaking. "Oh, dear God." And in that moment, the hospital itself seemed to breathe differently, everyone sensing that what had just happened was no accident. The words hung in the air like a heavy shadow, deliberately poisoned. The billionaire's world tilted on its axis. For a man who had fought in boardrooms, dominated markets, and crushed rivals with his wit and money, nothing had ever made him feel so powerless. His hands shook as he turned back toward the glass where his son lay surrounded by tubes and monitors. The small, fragile body looked almost swallowed by the machines keeping him alive. He pressed his forehead against the glass, whispering so faintly only the waitress beside him could hear. "Why him? He's just a little boy. He's never hurt anyone." The waitress stood stiff, her apron damp with sweat, but her eyes were firm despite the tears threatening to spill. She reached out, her hand trembling, and touched his arm. "Evil doesn't need a reason," she said softly, "but love. Love always finds one. Don't give up on him now." For a moment, their eyes met, two souls from worlds apart. She, a woman who spent her days clearing tables and serving strangers. He, a man who built empires with the stroke of a pen. Yet here, stripped of status and roles, they were only two people bound by one fragile heartbeat behind glass. The doctor stepped closer, his expression tense. "We've flushed most of the toxin from his system, but we need to identify what he was given. That will determine how well he recovers. Do you remember what he ate or drank just before he collapsed?" The billionaire's mind spun. His voice cracked as he answered. "He was drinking the juice, the one she gave him." He turned suddenly toward the waitress, his tone sharp, almost accusing. You handed it to him!" The waitress froze, her chest tightening as his words struck her like a blow. I didn't." She shook her head frantically, her eyes wide with hurt. "Sir, I swear I didn't know. I was just doing my job. Someone else prepared it. I only carried it to the table." The billionaire's face twisted with anguish. His voice rose, louder, harsher. "Then who? Who touched it before you? Who had access?" His hands clenched into fists, his desperation spilling into rage. The waitress's lips trembled, her voice breaking. I don't know. Please, believe me, I would never harm a child. I ran with him, didn't I? Would I carry him in my arms, fight through the crowd, beg the doctors to save him if I was guilty?" Her voice cracked, and a sob escaped her throat. The billionaire stopped, his anger collapsing into silence as her words echoed in the hallway. His shoulders slumped. He lowered his gaze, shame flickering across his face. "You're right. I'm sorry." His voice was low, raw. He's all I have." The waitress's tears fell freely now, but she nodded. "And right now, he needs you strong, not broken. He needs his father to fight for him." The billionaire turned back toward the glass, swallowing hard, fighting the lump in his throat. Fight for him. Yes. Inside the ER, the boy stirred faintly, his eyelids fluttering. The billionaire's breath caught. His hands splayed against the glass as though trying to reach through it. That's it, son. Open your eyes. Please. Open them. The doctor reappeared with a clipboard, his face etched with urgency. Mr. Liang, he addressed the billionaire, we'll need to run some tests on everyone who had contact with your son's food and drink today. Poisoning of this kind doesn't happen by accident. The billionaire's eyes narrowed. You mean someone tried to kill him? The doctor hesitated before nodding. It's a possibility we can't ignore. The waitress gasped, shaking her head in disbelief. But who would target a child? What kind of monster? Her words broke off, her voice trembling with fury and fear. The billionaire clenched his fists, his jaw tight. My enemies would. They can't get to me, so they come after the one thing that matters more than my life. His eyes burned with a fire that startled even himself. But they made a mistake. They underestimated him. They underestimated me. The waitress stepped closer, her voice trembling but steady. Then prove them wrong. Prove that love is stronger than hate. The billionaire turned to her slowly, his expression softening. Why do you care so much? Her answer was quiet, but every syllable rang with truth. Because I know what it feels like to be powerless. To watch someone you love suffer and not have the strength to stop it. I couldn't save my little brother years ago. He was sick, and we didn't have the money for treatment. He slipped away in my arms. I swore I would never stand by and watch another child fade without fighting for them. Her voice cracked and tears streamed down her cheeks. Not if I could help it. The billionaire stared at her speechless. For the first time, he saw her not as a waitress, not as a servant in a uniform, but as a woman who carried scars of her own. And in that moment, something inside him shifted. Then you're stronger than most people I know, he whispered. The silence between them was broken by the doctor's urgent tone. We've got a problem. The poison is still in his system. It's attacking his organs. If we don't identify it soon, he might not make it through the night. The billionaire staggered back, his knees almost giving way. No, you have to save him. The waitress caught his arm, steadying him. Don't break now. He needs you. We'll find out what it was. We'll find who did this. Her voice shook, but her eyes burned with determination. The doctor nodded grimly. I'll need your cooperation, and hers, he said, pointing at the waitress. She was closest to him before it happened. She may have noticed something others missed. The billionaire hesitated, then gave a single nod. Then she stays. She's not leaving his side. The waitress blinked, shocked. Me? But, sir, he cut her off, his voice steady. You carried him when no one else moved. You fought for him when I froze. You're the reason he's still alive, and I trust you. Her lips parted in disbelief, her heart pounding at the weight of his words. Trust. No one had ever said that to her before, not like this. The doctor interrupted. If you noticed anything unusual, smells, colors, even the way the drink looked, it could save his life. The waitress's brow furrowed as she squeezed her eyes shut, trying to recall every detail. The glass. It smelled faintly bitter, not like normal juice. I thought it was just me, but now... She opened her eyes, fear flashing in them. Someone tampered with it. The doctor scribbled notes. That helps. We'll run tests for common toxins with a bitter base. The billionaire turned to her, his voice low but urgent. You just might have given him a chance. Her breath hitched, but she stood taller, her voice trembling with hope. Then we hold on to that chance. We don't let go until he's safe. Through the glass, the boy stirred again, his small fingers twitching weakly against the sheets. The billionaire pressed his hand harder to the glass, tears blurring his vision. Come back to me, my boy. Please come back. And in the silence that followed, the waitress whispered under her breath, her voice breaking but fierce. "He will. He has to." The hospital clock ticked past midnight, its steady rhythm echoing through the quiet halls. The boy lay still inside the ER, wires and tubes encasing him like fragile threads binding him to life. His father, Mr. Liang, sat outside on a hard plastic chair, his head buried in his hands. For a man who had commanded boardrooms with an iron will, he looked like nothing more than a broken father waiting for a miracle. The waitress sat beside him, still in her stained uniform, her hands clenched tightly on her lap. She had not moved, not even when exhaustion pulled at her limbs. Every few minutes, she glanced at the ER window, silently praying that the child she had carried through the corridors would open his eyes again. The silence was broken by the sudden rush of the doctor, clipboard in hand, his expression tight. Both of them stood immediately, their hearts pounding. "We've identified the toxin," the doctor said, his voice grim. "It was a derivative of cyanide. Someone intended for this to be fatal." Mr. Liang's face turned white. His knees nearly buckled and his voice trembled. "Cyanide? My God!" The waitress covered her mouth with both hands, a muffled cry escaping her lips. That's murder," she whispered. The doctor nodded. "We managed to slow its spread, but his organs have been badly affected. He's stable for now, but the next few hours are critical. If he makes it through the night, he has a chance." The billionaire gripped the doctor's arm, desperation burning in his eyes. "Then don't leave him. Do whatever it takes. If you need specialists, medicine from abroad, anything, I'll have it flown here in an hour." His voice broke into pleading. "Just save my boy." The doctor placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "Money can buy resources, Mr. Liang, but right now what he needs most is strength. And strength doesn't come from wealth. It comes from love." Those words sank deep into the billionaire's chest like stones in water. He turned slowly to the waitress who had carried his son. For a moment he saw her again in his mind, running barefoot down the hospital hall, arms trembling but never letting go, tears streaming but refusing to stop. She hadn't thought of herself. She had thought only of his boy. He swallowed hard, his voice quieter than it had ever been. "You gave him strength, didn't you?" The waitress blinked back tears, her lips trembling. "I just held on to him like he was my own. Sometimes, that's all you can do. Hold on until help comes." The billionaire lowered his gaze, ashamed. For years, he had lived in a world where trust was rare, where loyalty had to be bought, where kindness was a currency he no longer believed in. But this woman, who owned nothing but her dignity, had risked everything for a child that wasn't hers. Suddenly, the monitors inside the ER began to beep wildly. Nurses shouted orders, the doctor sprinted back inside, and the billionaire and the waitress froze in horror. The boy's body convulsed, his small frame shuddering violently against the machines. "No, no, no, no!" the billionaire screamed, pounding his fists against the glass. "Don't you take him from me!" His voice cracked with a rawness that shattered the hallway. The waitress pressed her palms together, her tears spilling freely now. "Please, God, don't let this happen. He's just a little boy. Please." Inside, the team worked frantically. Compressions, injections, oxygen, minutes dragged into eternity. Then, finally, a faint, steady beep filled the room. The boy's convulsions ceased, his chest rose and fell slowly, and his tiny hand twitched against the sheets. The billionaire collapsed to his knees, his body shaking with sobs. The waitress knelt beside him, tears streaming down her own face as relief washed over them both like a wave. Moments later, the doctor stepped out, sweat beading on his forehead but a small, tired smile on his lips. "He's stabilizing. He's weak, but he's alive. He made it through the worst." The billionaire choked back sobs, his voice trembling. Thank you. But the doctor shook his head. "Don't thank me. Thank her." He nodded toward the waitress. If she hadn't acted when she did, your son wouldn't have had the time we needed to save him." The billionaire turned toward her, his eyes red, his face streaked with tears. He stood slowly, his body trembling, and looked at her with a depth of gratitude words could never fully carry. "I don't know how to repay you," he whispered. "You didn't just save my son. You saved me." The waitress shook her head gently, wiping her eyes. "I didn't do it for repayment. I did it because he deserves a life. Every child does." For a long moment, silence filled the hallway, heavy and beautiful all at once. And then, the billionaire stepped forward, his voice soft but firm. "From this day, you are not just a waitress in my eyes. You are family. Whatever you need, whatever you dream of, I will help you achieve it, because you gave me back my world tonight." Her lips parted, her voice breaking with emotion. "I don't need riches, sir. Just promise me you'll love him, every day. More than your empire, more than your pride. Because that's what children need most." He nodded, tears falling freely again. "I promise." Through the glass, the boy stirred, his small eyes fluttering open for the first time since the nightmare began. His tiny voice, hoarse but alive, whispered, "Daddy!" The billionaire rushed inside, falling to his knees at the boy's side, clutching his hand and sobbing openly. "I'm here, son. I'm right here. You're safe now. You're safe." The waitress stood at the doorway, tears streaming down her face, her heart swelling with relief. She knew in that moment that love, not power, had saved the boy. And as the night settled over the hospital, a quiet truth remained in everyone's mind. Sometimes heroes wear aprons, not capes. Sometimes the greatest acts of strength come from the humblest hands. And the lesson was clear. Life is fragile, love is priceless, and kindness can rewrite the ending of someone else's story. Just like how one stranger's courage had turned despair into hope. So the next time you see someone struggling, whether it's a child crying on the street, an old neighbor carrying heavy bags, or a friend silently breaking inside, remember this story. Step forward. Act. Because your one choice could be the reason someone survives the darkest night of their life. And with that, let me leave you with this final line. Sometimes the strongest people are not the ones who move mountains, but the ones who carry another's child through the fire and never let go. If this story touched you, subscribe to our channel, Black Saga. Drop a comment sharing your thoughts, and like this video. And don't forget to share it with someone who needs a reminder of the power of kindness today.